Hey guys, this is Tyler from nubgrammer.com. Nubgrammer.com is an ASP.NET blog that I started. If you guys want to go check it out, I'll put a link in the description. This video is intended to be a complimentary piece to the corresponding blog post on nubgrammer.com. So if you guys want to go check that out, I'll have a link to that specific blog post as well. And all the code that I'm going to be writing in this video will also be available on GitHub, and I'll put a link to that as well. So let's get started. So this is going to be a three-part project. We're going to write an RSS feed aggregator. An RSS feed is essentially just a standard for formatting an XML document. It's used for pulling out like news articles, I don't know, daily deals, that kind of thing. And that way, if another website wants to display information from your website, all they have to do is pull that feed and they get the information about a product, about the news article that you want them to have, and then they can format it and display it on their page however they want to, but it's still your original content. So what we're doing with an aggregator is creating an application that will pull these feeds in to one central location and then display them how you want them to be displayed on your desktop, or in your application, however you want to do it. From start to finish, this is what we're going to be creating. I'll just go ahead and demo it. It's going to have an installer, and there's going to be an external library for parsing your XML, and then there's going to be a forms document, which will make more sense when we get into Visual Studio, that actually handles all of your GUI and interaction. So this is the setup, and it was in the wrong monitor. So this is a basic installer. We'll hit next, 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 and there, it's installed. Now I called my program RSS Rag because when I originally wrote it, I wasn't necessarily thinking about a blog and a tutorial for it, but I figure that this is a good project to do. So here's our news tab. These are our feeds that we've got loaded. So we hit the tile, and that brings up our feed. And this is just the Newegg deals, daily deals feed. And here's another one. This is just a blog I read. And then there's a feeds tab that manages your feeds. So let's see, let's add a new one. What, demo? I may have a feed copied here. I do. Okay. So we add it, and now it's here. We can also edit it. Let's rename it to Sharky Copy because I used the same link from the Sharky blog here. And we hit edit. Yes, we want to edit. And now we go back to our news tab, click on it, and there, it's there. Then we can also delete it, and that's pretty much it. So the first part of this project is going to be writing the actual library that parses the XML information. Starting with this part first because it's mostly just code. There's not a whole lot of extra Visual Studio stuff going on. We'll get into that more when we get into the Windows Forms side of it, which is going to be part 2, and then part 3 will be creating the actual installer for it. So the first thing we're going to do is create a new project. We're going to select class library, the .NET framework version that creates the DLL for us. We can browse to the place we're going to save it. It looks like I'm already there. I'm going to call it XML parser. And because I've already manually created this location, I don't want it to create another one. So that's why I don't have this checked. If you want to just go ahead and create the folder automatically, then check that. The same thing with the new Git repository. My repository isn't set up to have individual repositories for each application that I write for you guys, so I'm going to leave that unchecked, but you can check that as well. So now that we've got everything selected, we can go ahead and hit OK. And our project is created. So there's two things we have to do immediately. The first thing we're going to do is change this class 1 to XML parser, and Visual Studio is smart enough to know that, hey, you're using written references to this file name in places, so we need to go ahead and change that. And you just hit yes and it'll take care of everything. The second thing we need to do is add another project to our solution. And all the solution is a collection of projects. Visual Studio has a nice way of organizing them for you, so you can create things that use each other but are not dependent upon each other, if that makes any sense. So let's go ahead and right click on the solution, go to Add, New Project, and go to console.app.net framework, and we're going to put this in, well, you could put it anywhere you want to, but I'm going to go ahead and put it in the same folder. So what is it? XML parser. Let's just do XML tester. Okay, click OK, and it's created. So now that we've added this XML tester project, the console application project, we can go ahead and try to build the program. So we'll hold Control and hit F5. Now you see this nasty little error message here. A project with an output type of class library cannot be started directly. In order to debug this project, add an executable project to the solution which references the library project. Set the executable project as the startup project. So what this is telling us to do is mostly what we've already done. We've created the console application to reference the library, but we haven't set the executable project as the startup project. So what we're going to do, select the solution, and that's important, go to Project, Properties, and go to Startup Project, which is the default. On the single startup project, change it to your console application, which is the tester. Okay, now we just hit OK. And now, if we do Control F5, we get a command window. Now, because we're not doing anything yet, it just wants us to hit enter and close it, and it runs. So the way I'm going to write code for you guys is that I'm not actually going to write it. And I know that sounds a little bit paradoxical, but what I mean is that I'm going to be copying and pasting in snippets of code that I've written off screen. I feel like that's going to let me explain it better than I would be able to if I was trying to explain it while I was writing it. So the first thing we're going to do is create a constructor function for our XML parser class. And that's just public XML parser parentheses curly brackets. Okay, and that's all we're going to do for now. Let's go ahead and save it, and let's try to use it in our program.cs file. Now remember, program.css is the program file for our console application. We are using a static method here, the main method, which means that anything that's static is meant to be used on its own, and by that, well, what you need to take away from that is that we can't use variables here unless they are static variables. I believe that's the way that works. So what we have to do is put our variables inside this function. So let's try to use the XML parser object that we just created in our XML parser project. So XML parser. Okay, now we have some issues here. XML parser, if you hover over it, the IntelliSense, which is a tool that Visual Studio uses, and it's really awesome. You'll learn to love it. So it's telling us that XML parser is a namespace, but is used like a type. The reason it's telling us that is that I made a mistake. In C#, you cannot name a class the same name as the namespace that it's in. So the easiest way for us to fix this is just rename our class. So let's call it parser instead of XML parser. Okay, we'll let it change everything for us. Save it. And go back over here. Let's take the XML out of it here as well. Okay, fixed. No, not really. There is one other thing we have to do. Because we are creating a DLL file, once this is compiled, we have to turn around and reference that DLL file in our console application. The way you can do that is adding another using line up here, similar to like using system and all that stuff. This is just default stuff that Visual Studio throws in there. So if you hover over the problem line, IntelliSense will show you some potential fixes. Okay, the first line, it generates the using directive for you. So you just click on it and it inserts it, and then our problem goes away. Let's go ahead and initialize this variable as a new instance of our parser class. So equals new parser, use IntelliSense there to make our lives easier. And then let's go ahead and write it out to the command line so that we can see what's going on. So command console write line parentheses parser .toString. Now before I do anything else here, this toString method, if you notice, there's not a toString method in our class that we've written here. ToString is a method that is built into default, or built in by default, to any object. And if you want to do something with it that's more than what you're going to see here in a few minutes, you have to override it, and I'll show you how to do that as well. But let's go ahead and save it, and then Control plus F5 to run it. And now we get a different line here. This is our namespace, and then this is our object. So this is what the default object toString method returns. So let's go ahead and hit enter, close it, and let's go to our parser.cs file. Now I'm going to go ahead and copy some more code in here. And this is how we're going to override that toString method. You have to use the keyword override, and you have to give it the same name as the method you're trying to override. This base.toString is saying, okay, take the default method and return it. So if we were to save this, run our program again, nothing has changed. So if we want to change that, we just get rid of this and type in a string here. So return, I'm a parser, whoops, parser object. Okay, save, Control plus F5 again, and now we have a different string here. Okay. So now that we have the basis of our project down and we know that everything works together the way it should, let's take a look at what an RSS feed is. So if you open a browser and type in RSS 2.0 spec, you'll get some search results here. And let's click on this first one. So what is RSS? Web Content Syndication Format. Essentially, it's just an XML sheet that has a whole bunch of tags in it. You have channels that essentially represent the website that they're coming from, and then in that channel you have items. And I have a XML sheet here that, well, it's an RSS feed from my website, the nubgrammer.com. And the first tag, well, we have this tag here, but this is just extra crap that RSS uses. But we have the channel tag here, and then there's some information about the channel, like the title, the description, language, last build date, and then you have items. Now, these items represent, in this case, different blog posts that I've got up there. And what we're going to do is go through and parse all of this information out so that we can use it and display it however we want to in our application. So if we go back to the specification page, we see that every channel is required to have a title, a link, and a description. So I think that's a good place for us to start. Let's go back to our application. And let's start by creating a channel class. So the way we're going to do that, go to XML parser, right click on it, go to add new folder, and I'm going to call this folder tags. And the reason I'm doing that instead of calling it classes, I know most people would recommend putting all your classes in a classes folder, whatever. To me, that's not the best way of doing it. I feel like you need to organize it depending on what your project is for, or like how your project is laid out, and there's just a whole lot of variables in it. In this case, since we're just parsing XML tags, that, you know, it makes sense to me to put all of our classes that represent our tags in a tags folder. So we've got that name. Let's go ahead and click on something else to make that naming permanent. Okay, right click on tags, go to add, go down to class, name it channel. Now our channel class is created in the XML parser.tags namespace. Got some code I'm going to paste in here. What we've got, we have the title property, the link property, description property, and build date property. If we go back to our RSS specifications, our channel, the channel says that the title, link, and description are all required elements, so we know that a channel is going to have those tags. Then we also have some optional tags down here, and this is where the, is it the last build date or the pub date? I don't remember. Okay, it's the last build date. Yeah. So that's going to be an optional tag that we're probably going to have to put some logic in to make sure that we're not passing a tag that doesn't exist, or else we'll get some kind of error. Whoops, where's it at? And then we have our channel constructor. We're passing in a string for the title, string for the link, string for the description, and string for the build date. And then we're just setting our properties equal to these. Then we have an overridden string, toString method. And again, all this is doing, we have the /n for the new line character. But this is going to format our channel in a way that's much more easy to read and makes more sense whenever we need to examine it and make sure it's working the way we want it to. Now, one thing I kind of glossed over is the properties. In C#, you have standard variables, and you also have a new thing called properties. What properties do is it eliminates the old way of thinking in terms of getters and setters. If you're familiar with encapsulation and all that, then you should know that your variables for classes should be private. And you can still do a private variable, so private int count. Now, if I wanted to access this count from outside of this class, I'm not going to be able to because it's private. Well, traditionally, you would say, okay, so public get count, return count. And maybe you only want to return the count if count is greater than 2. Else return null. Oh, sorry. Public int get count. And we can't return null because that's not, let's just do return 1. Okay, so that's how you would control your access to these variables outside of this class. Properties introduce a different way of doing that. Inside this get and set option, I'm not going to touch on it too much as far as showing you how to do it, but you can essentially write and declare your get and set functions within these curly brackets so that you don't have to do this extra error checking and have all these extra functions. It's just, I mean, it's just a different way of doing things. It still accomplishes the same goal. Okay, so I think that pretty much describes our channel class. Let's save it. Now that we have our channel class, let's go ahead and give our parser an instance of our channel class. So public channel, RSS channel, get set. So we have some squigglies here. Show potential fixes, and we'll import this using XML parser.tags line. That fixes that problem. Now we have another problem. Inconsistent accessibility. Property type channel is less accessible than property parser.rss channel. So what this is saying is that I've got it public here, but there's not a public here. So we have to put public in front of our class declaration. And we save it, and now that's fixed. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and paste some code, and let's see, this dot RSS channel equals this dot create channel. And what this create channel method does, we have a title, link, description, build date, some logic, and then finally we return a new instance of our channel class with those variables passed in as parameters. Now I'll come back to this in a second, and we won't worry about doc because there's some other stuff with that I've got to paste in. So try and catch. What we're going to try to do, if you remember, I said that not every channel is going to have a build date. So we're going to try to put information into our build date. If we can't find any information, it's going to throw an exception. Well, if it throws an exception, we're not going to let it break the program. We're going to catch it and say that our build date is just not available. So that's how we're handling that. Now this mess is something called link. And this is a Microsoft thing. It's kind of similar to SQL in that we are saying from C, which is it says it's a range variable there, but it's basically just a holder variable. So from C in doc.root.descendants channel. Doc is going to be a variable that holds the information about our XML document. The root is just the root tag. The descendants is basically all the tags under the root tag, and we're looking for the tag name channel. Okay, once we find the tag name channel, we're going to select the element called title within that channel tag and return the value. Now this first or default is pretty much used to handle the cases where there may be one or more titles uh, in a channel tag. Because RSS is not supposed to have duplicate titles or duplicate links and all that, you probably don't need that, but I'm putting it in for good measure. And then that's pretty much the exact same thing with these other, I guess, other three link statements. Let's go ahead and handle this doc thing. So doc is just a variable at the moment. So let's go ahead and set the variable. Private X document doc. Now we've got to fix this squiggly line, so show potential fixes using system.xml link. X document is, well, what it says there, represents an XML document. So that's why we have to give it that type. Now let's copy some more code in. Well, yeah. Copy. Sorry. This.doc. So this document, this.document equals X document, which is X document.load, which is a static class, and we're going to pass a URL into it that says, okay, go out to this URL and load all that data into this X document doc variable. This RSS feed URL, the best way to get it is pass it in through the constructor. So string RSS feed URL, and that fixes that squiggly. Now if you go back to our program, if I save it first, now our parser has an issue. So all I'm going to do is go through and find an RSS feed. And again, this is just the feed for my blog. Put parentheses down and paste it in the middle of them. Okay. So now, when we run it, we still don't see anything different. We're still just seeing the I'm a parser object because our program hasn't done anything yet, or done anything different yet. So let's change the string that it returns. Let's say, okay, instead of returning, oh, I'm a parser object, let's see if we can't return the name of the channel. So if we go to channel, let's see if we can return the title. So return this dot channel, or RSS channel dot toString. Yeah, let's just return the whole RSS channel because that makes more sense. And this will call the channel toString function, and this is what it's going to look like. Yes, so let's try it. Okay, now we already have quite a bit of information. We have the title, there is no link, and that's okay. There is a link tag, but there's not an actual link in there. And then we have the description and the build date. now that we have our channel being created within our parser based off the link that we give it whenever we create the parser or create an instance of the parser class, it's time to create an item class. Now, an item class is going to be very similar to the channel class. If you remember, a channel can have many items as per the RSS spec. So let me find some code over here and paste it in. Or I'm sorry, let me get it copied to the clipboard and create the class first. I guess that would be pretty helpful. So right click on tags, go to add class, let's call it item.cs. Okay. Now I'm going to paste some code in. And again, we have almost verbatim what we had in the channel class. It is slightly different. We have a pub date instead of a build date, but have similar properties, the same kind of variable setting, and then the toString. Let's save it. Then go back to our parser. Let me find some more code. We're going to use another function to create our items. Then let's go ahead and declare our items list up here. So public list item items. Actually, let's do it this way. Get set. Okay, and again we have to give our item class the public keyword. Ooh. Save it. Inconsistent. Oh, okay, there. It took a little bit to fix itself there. So we have our variable created to hold our items, and I'm doing a list of items again because we're going to have more than one item, and a list is a really good way to keep up with it. So let's go back to this create items function that I pasted in and just kind of mulled over like it wasn't anything. So we're going to create another list within this scope that is of type XElement, and we're going to call them item tags. doc.root.element, channel.elements, item.toList. There's a lot of stuff going on there. If you remember this link statement, it's kind of similar to that. So we're going to the root of our X document, the doc variable. We're going to find the element that is of type channel, and then we're going to get all the elements within that element that are of type item, and we're going to turn them into a list. Okay. And this was, I guess, just some testing garb I had in there. We can get rid of that. Then list items equals new list item. So what we're doing here is creating a holder for the items that we're going to create based off the item tags that are in this list. So we're going to do a for each loop, X element item, because every item that comes out of items tags is an X element. And then we're going to pull the string out of it, pull the link out of it, pull the description, pull the modified description. No, we're not going to pull the modified description. The modified description is kind of a hack that I had to put in. A lot of times with RSS feeds, depending on how they're written, some of the links they put in there for displaying images and such, especially when it comes to markup within the items, they put local links. Well, whenever we get to the web form or the formed portion of this, this will make a lot more sense. But basically, all I'm doing here is turning this local link into a global link. Then we pull the pub date out, and we're going to create an instance of the item class, and we're going to pass this information in, and then we're just going to add it to this list of items, and we're going to return that list of items after we've created it. So that's where we have to assign our items. So this dot items equals this dot create items. Okay. Now that we have our items created, we are pretty much done with the XML library, parsing library. And one last thing we could do is modify our parser toString method to return all of our items as well. And let's go ahead and do that. So instead of this one-liner here, let's do string temp. Let's not do that. Let's see. String output equals a blank string. Okay. So output plus equals this dot RSS channel dot toString. And let's return output. And now we want to add all the items. So for each item in this dot items, output plus equals item dot toString. Okay, save it. Control F. So we have the title of the channel, the link, description, and build date of the channel. Now we have our items, title, blog post, how to find your answers, the link to the blog post, the description, and the publish date. And then we have another item because there's two blog posts rather, in this particular feed. So that should be all we need to do for the XML parser. So thank you guys for watching. If you want to check out my blog, again, it's nubgrammer.com. I'd appreciate it if you want to leave a like or comment on this video. I'd appreciate that too. And be on the lookout for part 2 and 3. Again, part 2, we're going to touch on the Windows Forms side of this, so we actually get to make the GUI that uses the XML parser we just created. And part 3 will be the installer. Thanks, guys.